Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 20, we read the inspiring account of Jesus' resurrection. The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, whom Jesus loved, and said unto them, They have taken away the Lord. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in their midst, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. The resurrection of Jesus, doubted by many, but affirmed by those who were close to him, was a miraculous event, though one not unique in history, for many great saints of other religions have appeared to their disciples after death. Sometimes their appearance have been as that of Jesus was, in flesh and blood form, and not only in vision. Paramahansa Yogananda relates in the autobiography of a yogi the account of his guru, Sir Yukteswar's resurrection after his early passing. Miracles of this type are revealed only rarely to the masses, but accounts of them related by men and women of reputed truthfulness have inspired many devotees with faith in the reality of subtler than material states of existence. Resurrection, Yogananda explained, means transformation, ultimately, from any lower state of being to a higher one. Worldly consciousness cannot imagine such transformation except in terms of, perhaps, an improvement of the present mess of potage with the addition of a new flavoring. Divine consciousness, however, is capable of taking the base metal of worldliness and transforming it into a spiritual gold of divine wisdom and love. In keeping with this truth, the Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter tells us, All ye who into this ill world are come, fleeting and false, set your faith fast on me, fix heart and thought on me, adore me, bring offerings to me, make me prostrations, make me your supremest joy, and undivided unto my rest, your spirit shall be guided. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Easter. This is really the most profound teaching and example that we could have in our lives. An example, or like Swami Kriyananda said, a drama actually of a very essential and basic truth about salvation, about realization, really about resurrection. Resurrection is an interesting word because it assumes that you're coming back or that you're coming to something. And that in fact is the essence of the spiritual path, is that really the way the masters explain it is that God individualized himself in every one of us and then sent himself individually in all of our diverse aspects out from himself in spirit in a vast arc of time where he has to find the way to wake himself back up to his divinity. So it used to always confuse me when the masters would say, well, really what you do is you awaken the memory of your divine self, that as Jesus said, ye are Christs. We are actually ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, individualized. Exactly the same thing God is, but we're individualized. And we awaken or we remember or we resurrect that memory of our divine self. This weekend we've heard, we had a beautiful concert Friday evening on Good Friday. And again, some of the titles and some of the words to the songs of the oratorio that Swami wrote. Christ's light that shone from earth, from heaven, open for us the inner door. To all who love, the gift is given, joy and freedom evermore. There is just this deep and vast teaching about what it means for us to wake up from this finite dream, this delusion, this dream. It is a delusion and it is a dream, but it's also incredibly beautiful. Although it's a delusion, it also manifests for us or illustrates for us really how infinitely creative the Spirit of God is. A vast cosmos. And the masters on top of that say when we actually resurrect ourselves, we find a whole nother universe behind physical creation, behind the physical cosmos. And like Yogananda said, it is beyond imagination of expectancy. Because everything from spirit is created from the state of bliss. This weekend we've heard discussions on what it means to develop courage, to go through this process of awakening, and faith, and the importance of pardon, to pardon people, to realize they too, everybody, is on a path and we're blind. We really don't know, except for the good grace of God and the masters, we don't know. We come into this world, we don't have any memory of where we've come from, and we have no idea where we're going. So it is God's grace that we find a way to actually not only find the way out, but even to know what this is about. What's the purpose? Why do I find myself waking up in a world where I don't know where I came from and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't even know really the reason why I'm in this world? And that's the story of resurrection, because that's where the answers come. Asha yesterday also shared with our greater European family. And she told the story also of the Jewish tradition and what Jesus had to come up against, because they were the spokespeople for what truth is and what the law is. She described it as just this solid, rigid foundation of institutionalized religion. And in that process, he was an interloper. They didn't like what Jesus was teaching truth. And Jesus was teaching how to find God. And that was the scribes and the Pharisees' duty. And they really didn't, as we know, it was him coming up against them that eventually led to his crucifixion and to his resurrection. And of course, all of us know, but the profound, really the profound mystery, or I'm going to even say courage, of Jesus was that he knew what the result would be. He knew. That's why he said, well, Lord, if you could let this cup pass, but if not, thy will. And of course, had he not gone with the process of crucifixion, we wouldn't have today's story of resurrection. But the story of resurrection is so symbolic of our process, of our salvation. Because think about it. We have to, this is an illustration I've used in the past. I like it because we have to, in certain way, crucify our identification with a physical body, with form. Every religion has taught that ego is our biggest obstacle in realizing ourselves. And what did Yogananda say ego is? The soul's identification with the body. But it isn't just the body. It's actually form. The soul's identification with form. That is unsettling to some people. We of course teach the teachings of Kriya Yoga here at Ananda, and that's unsettling for some people because basically moksha, or union with spirit, that Jesus taught, that Krishna taught, that the major true religions in the world teach moksha, which is the self merging with spirit. And that idea that somehow in spirit I'm expanded consciousness, but that's what's unsettling to people. But the truth is that you never lose the sense of self. So one of the best ways to explain this, and I have a few quotes from the masters, but the best way to explain it is that Yogananda said God is in his home of infinity. Blissful infinity. As the book of Genesis says, God moved, spirit moved. And now we have the light of creation. The basis of all creation is light. It is the light of spirit, the light and the sound of Om and Amen, the sound of many waters, the sound of wind. But it's actually, Yogananda said, the combined vibration of every atom in the universe. Every atom in the universe has a positive and negative resistance that causes the atom to quiver ever so slightly, and that vibration is the cosmic energy that allows this whole universe to manifest. So, to our good fortune, the way that the Masters described it, for us to try to even want to assume this kind of experience is when I dream, I am. And we all are this sense of self. But on the mental screen, there's this wonderful light and energy image of whatever it is we're dreaming. Sometimes they're superconscious dreams, so vivid and so thrilling and so interesting and inspiring. But we never lose the sense of self. Sometimes it means we wake up before we realize that we were dreaming. What is interesting is, Yogananda said, God is in his home of infinity. His consciousness moves, produces the light that gives birth to the whole universe. But, Yogananda said, he knows he is dreaming. We don't. We don't know this creation, this life that we're in is a dream. It makes sense if you think about it, because I don't know where I came and I don't know where I'm going. And that's precisely what happens to us in a dream. All of a sudden, we find ourselves in the dream event. We didn't start in the dream event from a child and work our way up to all of a sudden now here. We're in a dream event that we don't know how it's going to end and we don't know where it started. And that's a little bit what we find ourselves. Here we do have a linear process of birth and adolescence and adulthood and death. So it's a process that it's a dream that has a certain form, but still, it's very similar to how we dream at night. But we never lose the sense of self. So I'd like to read this quote, because this is very, very important. Swami says that in a commentary on resurrection, that the crucifixion and the resurrection dramatize two essential conditions for knowing God. Willingness to face, for God's sake, to face our trials, and faith to accept it with love and courage. But sometimes when we're in the depths of our tests, what if that knowledge isn't sufficient? For example, I remember once, maybe 40 years ago now, that I ruptured a disc in my spine. And I just was absolutely opposed to surgery. I was convinced that there had to be a way that I could heal this myself. And month after month went by, and the disc continued to deteriorate, and the disc material continued to complicate the process, so that even gravity standing up would put my back, the compression would put pressure on the nerves, and this is how I would stand. And then it got to the point where I couldn't stand, that the disc material had totally pressurized the nerve down the leg, and I was on the floor most of the time. And finally, one night, in mental and physical desperation, I couldn't sleep even. I couldn't find a peaceful position that wasn't painful. And my mind was tormented. And I remembered a particular talk by a master where he said, "We are laughing and crying in the greatest delusion, and it's not worth shedding tears over." I couldn't even think of God's love or grace. All I could do was grab an affirmation, and all night long, we are laughing and crying in the greatest delusion, and it's not worth shedding tears. It's the closest I could come to remembering God or to somehow find any light in the situation. And very briefly, the long and short of it is that about dawn, I fell asleep, and then later that day I went to the doctor, and that was finally, the doctor, when he saw me in the condition, said, "You need to allow me to do surgery. I need to go in there and clean all that disc material out, and you're healthy, you're young, you'll be fine." But that happens to a lot of people, and sometimes that crisis in the dark tests, in the dark parts of our lives, sometimes we even say, maybe God doesn't love me. And there again we have the example of Jesus. What if Jesus thought that? What if Jesus said, "Oh, maybe God doesn't love me," and he just gave up? He could have hidden. He didn't have to go through the crucifixion. He knew it was coming. Is there any other way, Lord, to let this cup pass? But he accepted it with faith and courage and the belief that these things would pass. But still, for me, because of my past experience, sometimes those dark periods hide the very thing that we need to do the most. And so yes, intellectually it's okay to know that I need to develop courage and faith and hope, and I need to pardon others, I need to love others. But in the middle of those tests, when we're told, even if you can't do anything else, give the whole thing to God. And even that is difficult if it's really dark and you don't see any light. And that's why I think the teaching that we have that's extraordinary and really almost unique to our path, but also it's there in all true paths, all true religions that were founded by a true master. But what every religion teaches is that we need to find stillness. Motionless consciousness is the way Yogananda described it, but he actually even went a step further. He described it as vibrationless consciousness. Because what I just explained, I'm asleep, I am, and I dream. God is the cosmic I am. He's dreaming the atoms. The atoms are nothing but photon energy. He's dreaming light and energy, a universe of light and energy, vast beyond any imagination. The foundation is bliss. The whole universe is founded in bliss. But he's at home, in his home of infinity, eternal, infinity, motionless. Yogananda said, where God begins, motion ceases. And so we have to go into that state of motionless in order to find where God begins. It's essential, and every master, it doesn't matter whether it's Buddha, Krishna, Christ, Every master teaches that that is what we have to do. So I wanted to read these words because, let me see where, Sri Yukteswar said it this way: it is the Spirit of God that actively sustains every form and force in the universe. Yet He is transcendental and aloof in the blissful uncreated void beyond the world of vibratory phenomena. Sri Yukteswar further explains, saints who realize their divinity even while in the flesh know a similar twofold experience. It's really important for us to understand death isn't the answer to finally our awakening. Jesus said it very clearly. He who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my Father, and he shall go out no more. We have to make a conscious and concentrated effort to overcome the delusion of mortality. To remember our immortality. In essence, we were never born and we will never die. Consciousness is the basis of the universe. Cosmic consciousness never had a beginning and never had an end. The dream of God's creation has a beginning and an end, and everything in vibratory creation has a beginning and an end. But eternity is motionless, never beginning, never end. It would be as if, could we imagine that, in fact, I would like to ask us if we could just for a moment, if we could close our eyes and just look into the vastness at the Christ center, at the point between the eyebrows. And if we could calm the heart, calm the mind so deeply and so profoundly that we lost this identification with the body. And we lost this identification even with form. Because as Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. What the Masters teach is that once we see that light, the sense of self, which is never lost, but begins to expand in that light, all through the universe. An ecstatic expansion in the dream fabric of God's creation. It is blissful, as Master said, beyond imagination of expectancy. And we expand into where we feel all-knowing, omnipresent, but you never lose the sense of self. It's a guarantee that you never lose the sense of self. It is, we are individualized, ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss. And every attachment we have to form, every attachment we have to the body is delusion. So it's very important that we learn how to touch the sense of our eternal self. That part of us that is, as the Gita says, the self is never born, never dies. It is unchangeable. It is like this eternal observer where we, for eternity, observe. If we want to create, yes, God, as God says, He moves His consciousness and creation begins, but God's home exists in infinity, whether, Yogananda said, whether the universe does or does not exist. Our home is with the Father. That's what Jesus taught. My Father and I are one. He did say Christ is all and in all, and that is the Christ light. It's very important that we understand that when Spirit moved and God said, "Let there be light," that was the birth of the Christ light. This is important for us if we want to really enter into the depths of Christ's teachings. Jesus was the little human form in which the vast Christ consciousness was born. That light of Christ, "If thine eye be single," he said, "thy whole body shall be full of light." That vehicle is to know in intimate detail the bliss of God's creation. But God the Father, cosmic consciousness, exists for eternity, whether the universe does or does not exist. But here is the important point. Both the Father behind creation and Christ consciousness, which is, the way Master explained it, is the intelligence at the heart of every atom. You could almost say, it's rather a mundane description, but you could almost say that the Christ consciousness is God's idea or blueprint or design of creation. Every atom has a design. Every atom manifests this universe. That is the Christ. God's intelligence in every atom of creation. We are one with the Father. Both the consciousness at the heart of each atom and the consciousness of the Father are behind vibratory creation. That's why the Bible says, "Be still and know that I am God." We cannot find or experience resurrection if we don't learn to be still and know God. That's the essence. That is the foundation of our salvation. To finish this great arc of time and space that the soul has traveled through with infinite amount of experiences. We didn't just begin and we won't end. But we don't know we're dreaming, and that's really what resurrection is to know, go beyond this delusion. And so I have a particular quote from Master because I feel that he really emphasizes in a way that, with an energy that we can't really feel or describe. And it's very short, but he explains in a very powerful way the need to develop the inner silence.
Remember, the best shelter is in the silence of your soul. And if you can develop that silence, nothing in the world can touch you.
That's the end. It's so powerful. If you can develop that silence, nothing in the world can touch you. I remember Swami Kriyananda, he surprised me. He said, "I wonder if Jesus even suffered on the cross." And the concept took me by surprise because who wouldn't? But also he said, where was his consciousness? And it's incredible. The difference between ego-centered consciousness and divine consciousness is that he did it for others. He did it for other people's salvation, for his disciples. And we would say, woe me, I'm in pain, I'm on this cross. Yogananda said the greatest act of love was when Jesus on the cross could say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The world's in so much need of that kind of pardon, that kind of just empathy. We just don't know. Most of us are just wildly running around in delusion. We don't know what we do. You can't judge. You can't hate people in a world like this. In fact, I don't know if it's a consolation to you, but it was a consolation to me when Yogananda said, you know, our planet is out here on the edge of the Milky Way, and it's not a very highly developed planet. And I was thinking, if really we can step back, we realize it isn't a very highly developed planet. But we, as children of the light, as disciples of these great masters, we can help lift this consciousness. We do have a duty. And the duty isn't to save others. The duty is to be a model and an example from our own inner depth. As it says in the Festival of Light, the secret, the key is profoundly inside ourselves. And that is in the profound level of silence where we begin, where the doors begin to open up. Remember my favorite quote, the yogis say, when the mind is deeply calm, the inner light spontaneously appears. That's what we need to do to resurrect ourselves, is to go in to the heart of silence. So I want to leave you just with this one quote. Remember in the Bible, when all of the disciples gathered together, and they were all in a room together, they didn't lose their sense of discipleship. And even though they could have been persecuted, they could have been found and they could have been persecuted, they gathered together and Jesus appeared to them. And his words were, peace be with you. And that is my hope for you in this Easter season and in this, particularly this Easter day, but in this next year, peace be with you. Merge with the light. Feel God in every aspect of your life. Know that God is the doer. Happy Easter. God bless you all.